And welcome back. We are with Dr. John Hovannisian from Harvard Eye Associates, and we're going to talk about medical studies. There's all sorts of studies that are out there going on all the time, right? What kind of things do you find in your practice that you're putting people into studies for?
Well, we at Harvard Eye, we're very interested in the future of healthcare. We're very interested in what we can do for our patients that maybe not is better than what we've done in the past. And so we're constantly doing different types of studies. We have some pretty strict sort of guidelines that we follow, sort of self-imposed guidelines. We want to be clear that if we're asking a patient to be part of a study, that it's something that has a clear benefit to them, that it's not just sort of testing them out. But we do studies across all different parts of our practice, from dry eye, which is a common problem here in Southern California, to patients with cataract. We've used a number of lens implants that have never been used before. In glaucoma, we have studies on laser treatments that can help people get rid of eye drops for that disease. And in macular degeneration, we have studies to look at better ways of treating patients who have that common disease too.
Okay. And what's the patient's role if they're like been frustrated, they've been doing the same treatment and things don't get better, and you run into that, I'm sure, where people just a maintenance kind of thing. Should they be saying, hey, what kind of studies are out there, or that kind of thing? Should they advocate for themselves?
It's a great question. Absolutely. So a couple things. One that you can always learn about is you can learn about studies that are happening in the area by looking at a website called clinicaltrials.gov. GOV is a government website from the FDA, and even studies that are not for unapproved products will appear there. So if you can look up the condition you have, look up where there are studies that are nearby, and see if it's something that might interest you. And it's a good idea then to ask your doctor if your doctor thinks that that study might be appropriate. Whether it's one that your doctor is doing or another center is doing, it's always a good thing to say, hey, are there any studies you're aware of that might be of benefit to me with my unique condition?
Right. Now, when there's a study, sometimes do you run them out of your office, or do they have to go to other clinics? There's a little combination of both.
Great question. The studies that we do are all run out of our office. In other words, patients come to the same place that they're used to coming. They park in the same place they're used to parking, and it's generally the same doctor that they're used to seeing. Although, at our practice we have 20 doctors and we have a whole variety of different specialists, often there's a nice benefit in seeing somebody who really specializes in the condition that the study relates to.
Now, sometimes they're getting medications, they're getting some new kind of things. What are the concerns that a lot of patients maybe come through the door asking about that? I'd like to do the study, I'd like to see if it can be improved, but what are their biggest fears?
So our goal is really the same as the patient's goal, is that they understand what the benefits will be to them if they participate in a study. They understand if there are any potential downsides, and usually those are pretty small risks. And then that they only proceed with participating in a study if it really feels like it's right to them. And there's just no point in pushing forward if you don't feel comfortable with getting involved in a study. So we're big on educating our patients and what they're about.
Yeah, people, the guinea pig kind of theory about that, like, I don't want to be a guinea pig, right?
That's right. Yeah, nobody wants to feel like that, and we don't want anybody to be a guinea pig. We don't do, quote, guinea pig studies. We do studies where you have fairly well-proven science that's maybe being applied in a slightly new way, but not a high-risk way to our patients.
Now, usually when it gets to human trials, as you heard, they're in human trials now. There's a track record of success that only gets you there, right? So we're not talking about unproven or unsupported testing when we're talking about this level, right?
Yeah, so research studies have a wide span of what they can be. So there are products that are FDA approved that still need to be studied because we may be applying those in different ways than we did before. We do a lot of those types of studies because we're trying to learn, really in a unique type of patient, how does this well-proven drug work? Does it work maybe better than another drug? Does it work better than nothing at all? And so those kinds of studies are usually helpful to patients who participate because usually they're getting the drug at no cost, and sometimes these are costly drugs, so that's a benefit that you can see. And they themselves will learn, and many people feel good because they're contributing to science. They're helping other patients in the future have better care. Then there are studies that are for not FDA-approved products, and there's nothing wrong with those either, but it's helpful to understand how much risk am I taking? If this has not been proven to the FDA to be safe and effective, how much risk really is there?
Right.
And some products are radically new, and we don't know everything about them. Others are just slight improvements on existing products that are well proven and safe. two very different types of studies to participate in.
Now, on that side, when it's unproven FDA, sometimes folks are like, and you might be getting a placebo. I mean, do people kind of stay away from that? I don't really want to be like the guinea pig kind of thing. I don't want to be the placebo guy. I want to get to treatment to see if it works.
So it's really important to understand whether there's a placebo group. A placebo group, of course, means like a sugar pill or a treatment that's not really a treatment.
So they can have like a baseline and then let's see who got what.
Well-done research studies always compare to a control group, where where we're not doing anything, except sort of going through the motions of treatment, and that allows us to learn that. And in some cases, that may be okay. Being in a control group for a condition that may not need treatment is probably okay, because that would be an alternative that we might pursue if the patient were not in a study, right? So we learn either way, and if you've seen one study, you've seen one study. And so you need to ask your doctor, and doctors are motivated not just to enroll patients in studies. We're not interested in experimenting on our patients. We're interested in advancing science and helping people. That's why we do what we do. So we give our patients the straight scoop on whether we think it's good for them or not.
Now, people, like you said, people can get paid for studies, but you're not making an income here, right? This is just kind of like your time and your costs for going back and forth, really. That's the kind of payments we're talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question and a great point. So nobody gets rich from being part of research studies, but there are often cases where it takes that little extra time than it might if you were going through a regular doctor's visit. And so those studies will often compensate. And that compensation could be in the form of payment. It could also, sometimes it's gift cards, and sometimes it's just a free, no cost access to the product that's being given. So either way, it's a compensation of sorts to the patient who participates.
Now, when we talk about people like you said getting a drug that is going to be expensive or something they couldn't afford, when the study's over, and maybe that patient's had success there, does that mean the free medication is over as well oftentimes, or is it kind of depends on the study?
It depends on the study. Usually it does mean that that period is over, because studies have limited budgets too, and they can only subsidize the cost of a medication for so long. But we try, when we have that situation, to do everything we can to get extra samples and find ways to make it affordable to patients so that it's something they can continue to benefit from.
And do the drug makers sometimes do kind of the same thing? They'll offer that maybe a special discount for people who participate in the study and things like that, so maybe there's a little bit of hope to prolong the ability to get that drug?
There are lots of different ways that we work with the drug makers to try to help patients to make their products affordable. So we do that honestly, whether somebody's in a study or not, but certainly there's a special place in our heart for our patients who try to help other patients and try to help us advance the science that we work in.
Okay, kind of try to bottom line it for me, and I know this is an impossible question. How much risk is really involved in doing something like this for a patient?
It totally depends on the study. In many of them, there is absolutely no risk at all. In some studies, you're not even doing anything different. You're just observing maybe more closely the treatment that you're already on for a condition. And so that's an example where there's absolutely no risk, maybe a little time spent. In some studies, we collect data on patients similarly, just observational data, and so zero risk. In other cases, if you're doing something that's first in man, that you have to think carefully about. Okay, what is this science based on? If it's a close approximation to something that's well proven, then that's probably just fine. We've done that with lots of lens implants. We've had lens implant technology for 50 years. We know pretty well what works and doesn't.
You're pretty got the game
design. Yeah, as long as it's not. That's right. As long as it's not a radically different design, we can feel pretty good about using a new first-in-man type of lens implant. But something that's never been tried before, that deserves a conversation about. Well, here's what we're going to learn from this study. Here's what you can potentially gain, and here's what you potentially risk.
One more question on the caution side. If I'm starting to have side effects, something's going wrong, I don't feel right, or I'm causing pain, what should you do if you're in a study and those things start to happen?
Whether you're in a study or not, it's always good to communicate with your care team to let your doctor know. Ultimately, we really run toward patients where they're having an unusual problem, whether they're in a study or not, but particularly when they're in a study. We want to make sure that if there is a problem, is it related to the study product? Is it related to something else? And what can we do to minimize risk? In all cases, patients are in control of whether they're in a study. If for any reason you're uncomfortable, I tell my patients, don't participate from the beginning. If during a study you thought maybe this would work out well and for some reason it's not and you're concerned, no matter what anyone's telling you, it is absolutely the patient's right to withdraw. There is never a penalty or any threat of any sort of bad outcome. We're here to take care of our patients. We're grateful to them when they help us to help other patients through studies, but nobody ever gets pushed into participating in research.
Well, it sounds like a very interesting opportunity that folks at Harvard Eye Associates or wherever your doctor might be should ask about the doctor and see about participating.
You got it.
Dr. Hovannisian, thank you so much for joining us.
So good to see you and so good to work with you.
Absolutely. Thanks. All right, we'll be right back.